Hi, my name's Paul Hennessy. I'm an assistant principal at the Open Access College. The intention of this video is to work you through a process of logging in and setting up a WebEx online teaching session. And then I'll just go on and show a few pedagogical priorities that we take into consideration when we put online learning together here at the Open Access College. Okay, first let's look at just being able to log into WebEx. If you follow the URL provided by DFE to get us in there, it'll take you to the Cisco WebEx homepage. You'll need to sign in. When you sign in, it's with your LearnLink email address to start with. Now, when you do this for the first time, even the first couple of times, once you enter your LearnLink email address, it will then still redirect you to a full LearnLink login where both your username and password for your LearnLink account are required. After you've entered that, it will take you to the WebEx environment, and WebEx meetings is the process or the site we're going to pursue in order to set up training opportunities. Now, both teachers and students at this stage may be prompted to sync WebEx with the particular web browser that you use. There'll be some instructions about doing that on your screen. That's only the first time. After that, each time you go in, that step will be avoided. What we then want to do in terms of setting up an online lesson in WebEx is look at WebEx training. And when you click that, it'll take you to the Cisco environment where WebEx training is what we want to set up. Now, I'm just going to run through that process live for you just to show you how that can occur. So here we are at the Cisco WebEx homepage. Sign in button's up the top. If we click the sign in button, it's WebEx meetings that we want to sign into. So we click on WebEx meetings, and here's where it prompts us for our LearnLink email address. So we input that when it works. And click next. All right, and there we are at our LearnLink login. Password. Sign in. And then we're into the WebEx environment. Over here on the left is where we can set up WebEx training. And then in the blue menu items down the left-hand side, we want to either schedule a training session or create an instant training session. Scheduling allows us to set up training sessions that happen periodically, so once a week or more. An instant training session is a one-off session. What we'll look at first is the scheduled training, where we can set up recurring training events. So when you click schedule training, you'll have a range of items that you need to work through to set up. You need to give your session a topic and a password. There's a default password that you can use, or I generally simplify those passwords a little. In the second section about the audio conference setting, there is a drop-down menu where you have either WebEx audio or VoIP only as your options. I would suggest WebEx audio. VoIP will work as well. The difference being with WebEx audio, students or participants in the session, if they're not at a computer but just on a smartphone, they can actually call in using a toll-free number into the event and have the audio. You need to set up the starting time and whether it's a recurring or single session and how long the session is, and you can then set up the recurring elements of that. So we try and do that over in WebEx. I select schedule training. My topic, let's just have a test session. Let's change the name, the password, so it's a bit easier. Let's just call it Test 2020. Test 2020. And then we come down, here's the drop-down menu where VoIP only or WebEx audio. I ensure WebEx audio is selected. Students can log in by dialing in with their smartphone to a toll-free number. The date can be today. We set the time, perhaps a bit later in the day, 10:15 a.m. And then here's where if I choose a recurring single session class, so that's a class that's repeated each Monday at the same time, and we can either end on a particular date or we could end after, let's say, 10 sessions if we work through term 2 with 1 hour duration. And that will set up our WebEx event so that it occurs at the same time each Monday for 10 sessions in a row. All right, next what we need to do is get some students in. So we need to invite some attendees. We can also invite presenters who would act as co-host. So this is the environment where we invite people into our training session. When you invite new attendees, you have a menu that's important that you fill out correctly. You give the name and email address. The email address is particularly important to get correct. I normally change the location to Australia by some method. Mine's defaulted to UK, and there's an option here to add new attendees to my address book. Now, I always add them to the address book. It just makes them easier to find out afterwards. These are some examples of people that have been added to my address book for this particular session. You could also at this stage invite as alternate host. So once you've added the name and the address, you're either adding them as an attendee or inviting them as an alternate guest. You need to click Add Attendee over here. Once that's done, our list up here will populate. We can then select all of the people in that list, hit invite, and it will send an email invitation to those people to join the group. So in WebEx, invite attendees, if we click on that, here's our screen where we add a name. So let me add, I'll add my wife, who's a kindy director. So Alison.Hennessy2 at schools.sa.edu.au, which was the email address. So let me just get that in the right spot. Put that there and put her name up there. Ellie Hennessy. Down here, I change to Australia as our locale. I'm going to add as an attendee. If I just make that a little bit bigger, there's my Add Attendee button over there. When I click that, you'll notice Ellie Hennessy comes up in my list of potential attendees. I can keep going and add multiple people to my session, so all the students in our class. We could then select all of them. You'll notice that there's a tick over there where they've been selected, and then hit invite. And then an invite will be sent to all those people. An email invite will be sent to all those people for the WebEx session created. Once we've invited all our attendees, we scroll down a bit further in our schedule training menu, and we hit schedule training. And you'll have a list of the various times that the session's been scheduled for. Hit OK, and then everything's been set up with an email sent to all attendees, and we're ready to start our training sessions. Once you've set up all of the session and we're ready to launch into our session, then when you go into WebEx, this is the screen that you use. There's two menu views, classic view and modern view. For some reason, I'm a creature of habit. I default to classic view all of the time. Your upcoming meetings are shown as a list. and when you hit start, you will start your WebEx training session. So once you've started your training session and you're in there as the teacher, that's terrific. We want to get some students in there so we can do some learning with them. What happens is prior to your WebEx session, mine was set up with a 5-minute prior email sent, students will receive an email invite into the session. That email invite has an active link that will take them straight to the session. When they click on that active link, now in the first instance, if they haven't synced WebEx to their browser, they'll need to go through the same process, logging in with their LearnLink account, as we did as teachers, sync WebEx to their browser, but then their session will come up with a blue button over on the right to join that session now. Once they've done that, they'll be in your WebEx session and will be ready to start some learning. Okay, the alternate to a recurring training session is an instant training session. I use the instant sessions for one-on-one or small group help if students are having some issues with their learning in the independent space. They'll communicate with me and I'll set an instant training session up with them. Over in your Cisco WebEx menu on the left-hand side, instant session is the one under scheduled training. Same deal, topic and password. Make sure audio conference is checked, and then it's simply start session. Once you start the session, the same option with your audio conference setting will be made available, so either WebEx audio or VoIP only. Again, I choose WebEx audio, click OK, and then our instant session is launched. So over here in the WebEx environment, if I click on instant session, let's just put test session 2, make sure I select audio conference, start session. Again, there's my audio options. I'm choosing WebEx audio, OK. And what should happen is my WebEx event will commence. And there it is. I'm now in the WebEx environment and ready to go. Once you start your WebEx session and it's opened up for your instant training, you'll have the option to either use the phone or call using the computer. If we're trying to be interactive, we'll call using the computer. You then have the option to invite some members, some students into your instant WebEx training session. All you do is you enter the email address of the students that you're inviting in, send that request, and they'll receive an email to allow them to log in. We are back in our WebEx environment. I can call using computer. You can do an audio test if you want. We'll skip that just at the moment. There's the audio input and outputs. And here's our invite and remind people. Enter the email addresses, send the invite, and you'll have students start coming into your instant WebEx session. Right, let's focus on making sure WebEx is set up so that we can have a productive lesson, whether it's a recurring or instant, doesn't matter. I always encourage students, and one of the big issues is audio. Doing an audio test, there's an audio menu at the top, or as we just saw, you can get a speaker microphone audio test to launch straight away. From that top menu, if we choose speaker audio test, then you can test both your speaker and your microphone. Now, if you have no headset logged into your computer, it will simply be the inbuilt speaker and microphone for your device that you're using, that you are testing, to ensure that you can hear and communicate at the other end. If you have a headset logged in, or you have some Bluetooth earpods or other things, if there are potentially multiple audio devices, you will have a drop down where you can choose the device that you are planning on using and test that particular device. That is one of the key areas that cause issues for students when they come into WebEx events, it's worth spending time working with them to make sure they know how to check their audio to ensure things are working. All right, so back in the WebEx environment, there's the audio menu option up the top, the speaker, microphone, audio test, and there's the option for us to choose. Now, I haven't got any other audio devices plugged into my machine, so it's only the built-in speaker and microphone, so I don't have anything to check at the moment. Once teachers and students are in the WebEx events, we've checked audio, everything's working, then what we want to do is make sure that we can share some content and interact with. There's two options you'll see in the middle of the screen. When you launch WebEx, we'll have a sharing button that you can click on that would allow you to share your desktop. You could share a file, PowerPoint, PDF, Excel document. You can share video as well, or a whole range of applications can be shared. The alternate way is that, again, if we use the menu system across the top, there is a share menu which has desktop, file and application, but it also has a whiteboard. And that's when you can share a blank whiteboard that you can interact with students as a clean slate to start the learning. Okay, so here we are back in WebEx. There's the big share file icon. If I just close that one, cancel that, I can select sharing the desktop, which will show any programs you've got open on your desktop behind. You could share a file. I'm a Mac user, so I predominantly share PDF files. For some reason, that just works a bit better on the Mac. PC users generally share PowerPoint files, and there's various other applications that you can choose to share. Up the top is our share menu item, which allows us the same, the desktop, the file and some applications, but it's that whiteboard option that we can choose, which launches a blank whiteboard, which then allows some interaction with students on a blank screen. Okay, so even if you start with a whiteboard, you can still share another file as well. So if we go share file, let's see if we can find a file to share. I'll just go to my desktop. I think I've got a PDF file on there. There it is, Introduction to Teaching. Let's see if we can launch a PDF file that we can use to show a few things about WebEx. Okay, so there's the PDF file that's been launched. You'll notice up here we can still toggle back to the whiteboard or back to the file that we've got open. You can have multiple files open that you could toggle between if you wanted to. Once we've started sharing some files or whiteboards and we're working with students, I always go through the process of synchronizing my screen. My screen at work is significantly larger than what many students would have, so in order for everyone to see the same thing without needing to scroll unprompted, what I do is I use the view menu across the top. I go down to synchronize for all, and what happens is that my screen and the student screens are synchronized so that when I scroll, they see what I see on my screen. With our PDF file in WebEx ready to go, I can go up to my view menu, down to synchronize for all, and then what's on my screen as I scroll through pages will be seen on the student's screen. So if we look at the whiteboard, the WebEx classroom in general, we've got our whiteboard and content sharing environment. This is a slide from a vectors lesson I did with my Stage 1 Specialist Maths class last week. So you can have some content and some written applications on it. Over on the right-hand panel, we have a list of panelists, and attendees will be the students in your class will be listed down there, the names of students. You have the capacity to put video and video on, so students can see you if you've got a webcam. I just use the camera from my computer most times. The red mute button is really important. You do pick up a bit of background noise. It takes a while for students to get in the routine of muting when they're not talking, and then unmuting when it's time to talk. We have some communication tools, which are little icons and emojis down here, which includes things like putting a hand up, a tick or a cross, a range of smiley faces. There's a fast forward or rewind button, which is a student's way of saying, hey, slow down, Paul, you're going a bit quick, or speed it up, I'm getting a little bit bored. Students can text chat to the panellist. They can't text chat to each other. So the text chat is between the host or the panellist. You could have more than one host, and the attendees. You also have the option down here to record your session, save it using a particular file format, and make it available to students as a support mechanism when they go off into the independent space and start working. So back over in WebEx, we have our content that we can annotate, do the maths, support the students to build up an understanding of particular concepts. We can mute and unmute so that people can hear. We can turn the video on, which will access the camera. Just be cautious with the camera. I'll talk a bit about bandwidth later. We can turn it off. We'll have attendees listed. Students are generally polite, so they put their hand icon up if they want to ask a question. I'm happy for students to jump in, providing the class size is manageable. You could ask questions that just require a green tick as a response, sometimes a red cross if students disagree. We have our slow down and speed up icons that are available to the attendees. We have a range of other icons, including different smiley faces about how we're travelling. The little applause icon is often used when good things occur in the WebEx event. And the little teacup is put up when either panellists or attendees need to have a break for whatever reason. The little teacup indicates they're not around at the moment. Here's our text chat area down the bottom, and our record button that we can use to record the session. All right, once we're underway in WebEx, at OAC, it is our group learning space. So we want the students to be able to participate in the session as well. There's another menu item up the top, which is participants. And one of the options you have is to assign privileges. So if you choose assign privileges, that will then allow students to engage on the whiteboard or the file that's open in WebEx. What I choose is annotate documents. Once you give students, and click OK, when you give students the option to annotate the documents, they have access to all these participation tools on the top, which we'll have a look at in a minute, to annotate any particular whiteboard or document that's open. So what that looks like in WebEx is the participant menu item at the top, down to assign privileges. If I allow students to annotate documents, I select that and click OK. They then have access to these icons up the top, which they can use to annotate. One of the cool ones I like is the arrow. Students can click on the arrow and they place it somewhere on the screen. It has their name on it. You can get students to identify particular concepts, ideas, events on your screen that you want. They have a text option, so it's going to be pretty small, I think. Yep, way too small, but I can change the font size. You can add text. We have a range of lines that we can add on our screen. We have a range of shapes that we can include on our screen that we have access to, and simply the pen tool and the pencil tool, so students can write or draw particular concepts on the screen and annotate. There is an eraser that we can eliminate stuff that shouldn't be there as well. So all those annotation tools are available once we assign privileges. Okay, some considerations around WebEx training sessions. The audio is, as I mentioned earlier, can be problematic at times. We encourage students to use headsets if possible. Background noise can become an issue. So that's one you may need to work through to get some confidence and consistency in students and teachers. The use of the hands up tool, different teachers at our side have different views on that. Also the use of the text chat. I personally prefer to hear my students. Some are less willing to contribute than others, so text chat's okay, but I find asking specific students to communicate orally often gets good results. Leaving it open-ended, not so much. There is the option of breakout rooms, a little bit more technical in terms of setting up in WebEx, but once you set up breakout rooms, what you can essentially do is have small groups working. So how you choose to use that. The teacher can't obviously be in every session at once, so they need to move between them. Video on or not, it does give you the chance to have a better connection, I think, with students when the video is on. You'd have to be considerate of the background that's in and also lighting. But video can play around with bandwidth, especially in the upload speeds that particular students may have in their family environment. The video sometimes can cause significant lag in students hearing or seeing the things that the teacher's doing, and likewise the teacher seeing or hearing what the students do. My preference, I like to have the video on when I welcome or greet students into the lesson. Once we start working, I tend to turn it off unless I really want to emphasise things or have them refocus on me. I might turn the video back on, but otherwise I'd leave it off so that we try and eliminate as much of the lag as possible. Alright, you will be frustrated. It will happen. Technology will fail from time to time. It's about being able to have that resilience from both the teacher and student perspective to soldier on. The audio, like I said, is an issue, but it is important to understand that headphones and mics aren't necessarily needed if you're in a quiet space. I'm in my office at the moment with the door shut. There is a few teachers outside, but it's reasonably quiet. I think the audio is being picked up okay. My advice, play around, explore what WebEx can and can't do. You're not going to break it. It's pretty robust. Play around. In our context at the Open Access College, we have a dedicated learning technology help desk which has a direct email and phone number for students to call in if they are experiencing technology frustrations or problems and are unable to get into the WebEx lessons. That works really well for us, and it does ease some of those frustrations in students when they have trouble, especially early on setting them up. So if you have the capacity for any support mechanism like that, I'm sure students would appreciate it. But remember, the technology will fail. It always does from time to time, and we can't avoid it. I encourage our teachers to have a plan B or a plan C even. If technology does fail, sometimes that plan B is executed when we initiate our first contacts in WebEx, and we let students know this is what's going to happen. If the technology crashes on it, you might receive an email from the student might receive an email from the teacher saying, hey, technology crashed, we'll call it quits for the day, and these are the things I'd like you to do, and we'll try again next time. But have a plan B. Don't just go into it expecting the technology to be problem-free every time. That's when we do get frustrated, and we can find ways around it. All right, I just want to spend a moment talking more broadly about pedagogical considerations when we're teaching online. At the Open Access College, we use a version of the gradual release of responsibility model of pedagogy, where we have elements of model, share, guide and apply. Sometimes we simplify them down to I do, we do and you do. But we're really conscious when we put online learning together not to move too quickly from the elements of the pedagogy that the teacher is responsible for to the elements that the students are responsible for. Teachers tend to find when that shift is too rapid, so we do some modelling or some content sharing and then we ask students to go away and do something with it, that's when teachers generally experience disappointment and frustration, and they don't see a lot of evidence of learning coming back in from students. These two elements, the I do and you do components, we also try to push to the independent space as much as we can. Not all of it can go there, and we do some in the grouped WebEx space together. But one of the things we really try to do in the WebEx space, we use it as our group learning space, and that's where the sharing and the guiding elements of the pedagogy are really important. So if we simply use the WebEx event to lecture about content, then we're not allowing that group space to do serve its purpose, and that responsibility then we run the risk of it shifting too rapidly to students, and we will be frustrated with what we see in return from them. So when we are planning the learning for our online lessons, we think of both the independent space and the group space. So I'll just write them up. Independent space, whoops, it's one of those times when the pen goes crazy. I'm using a stylist, so I'll just get rid of that. The independent space and the group learning space. One of the things we try to do is identify some intentional content we need students to know, and if we can push that to the independent space and students can access it before the WebEx lesson, then that's terrific. Now obviously there's some accountability mechanisms. We need to work with students to ensure they can self-manage in the independent space and access that content. The independent work after the WebEx lesson is also generally occurring in the independent space. We need to really consider how students can then demonstrate evidence of their learning to us, what platforms are available, and we also need to think seriously about support. What we want to, let's see if I can change that colour. It's not behaving too well. Yep, there we go. During the lesson is during the WebEx lesson, which is our grouped learning space. We're really conscious on what the students are doing in that space. We try and be as flexible in that environment as we can. We try that sharing and guiding elements of the pedagogy. We do that using Google Classroom or Microsoft Teams. That's where the breakout rooms can be useful to get students working together. Always, the work that's done in that group space is directly related to the intentional content that was pushed to the independent space prior to the lesson. We need to ensure that when students leave our group lesson, they do understand exactly what's required, and they have to understand the material that we've been working with so they can apply it in the independent space. A lot of times when teachers are frustrated with students not providing evidence of learning, there's evidence to suggest that the students didn't really understand what was required, and we need to really be conscious and diligent in making sure we understand and know that students understand what's required. Shifting some of that content into the independent learning space, there's a few different programs that I use. There's a range out there that people can use. For video content, I'm big on video content as a maths teacher. I use a program called Edpuzzle. which simply allows me to take video snippets that I put together or that I access from elsewhere. But what I can do is I can insert questions within the video. So the video poses a question, and students need to answer that question before continuing on with the video. Those questions that are inserted into the video prevent the students from just skipping through and not watching and understanding what's involved. Other people will simply add MP4 files of video content to Daymap or to Microsoft Teams, and students can access it there. I just like the accountability within Edpuzzle. Actively Learn is very similar, and it was a paid product, but I believe recently has become free again for a period of time. Actively Learn does the same thing as Edpuzzle, but with text content instead of video content. So you can upload text documents like PDFs, you can break them into sections, you can pose questions about sections that students read, and they need to answer those sections before you go on. The beauty of both of these products is that if used correctly and students engage with them, you get a clear understanding of what students know when they head into the WebEx lesson, but also what some of the misconceptions and misunderstandings are that you need to address. The other one that I'm good on, that I'm keen on, people have their own programs that they like for video capture. Screencast-O-Matic's the one that I go to. Again, being a creature of habit, I used it a while back and found it quite straightforward, so I stay with it. It is free. The free element of it, I think, has a limitation on the length of videos you can record. If you want to go into lengthier videos, then there could be slight cost associated with it. Some lesson etiquette in the online environment. It's important to check in with students before the lesson. If you ask them to do some stuff before the lesson, make sure you've checked in, you've seen whether they've done it, you've got an understanding of what they know coming into the lesson. Just like in a classroom, greet the students. They do enjoy that social contact in the online environment, and greetings are really important. The explicit teaching part can be problematic from time to time. It depends on the teacher, it depends on the content and the subject. But my advice is just be conscious about how much explicit teaching you do within the WebEx event. Students won't just sit and listen without having some participation for lengthy periods of time. Really try hard to use that collaborative learning, the share and guide elements of that pedagogy. Try and build them in your planning to make sure they're used within the online learning space. The concept of the exit cards is what I was saying on the last slide. When we leave the WebEx lesson and students go off into the independent space to hopefully do some work for us, how confident are we that they really know what they need to do and understand the material they're working with? Teachers who are really confident they know what students can do when they leave the lesson tend to get far better results, so it's worth some consideration. Our site has started to undertake the Berry Street model of education training at the beginning of this year. Like most things, it's on hold at the moment. But the thing that we've got out of it so far that we're really working on trying to put in place is ensuring we have a consistent, predictable routine for our students. They still may engage with a whole range of different learning platforms with different teachers, but we try within our own teaching and across teaching teams to be as consistent and as predictable with our routine for learning as we can. We tend to get far better engagement from our students when we do that well. Almost there. Your context is really important. All the things I've talked about and demonstrated today come from an open access college context. And it's important to understand that from a secondary perspective at OAC, we base our learning on one 50-minute WebEx lesson per week. So there's 50 minutes of group learning time. there's still a large element of independent learning that's required, and supporting that space is really important. That's where we use Google Classroom, Moodle, email, Daymap. Other places are using Microsoft Teams in that environment. I know the department supports Microsoft Teams, Daymap and WebEx. We've actually undertaken our own risk assessment with other platforms, and I'd encourage you to think carefully about that if you expand into other platforms. Our learning technology department here at OAC could possibly provide some assistance in terms of some of those risk assessments. The other thing is class or group sizes. Ours run at around 8 through to 12 students in any group, so we keep the groups reasonably small to enable that collaboration and management. If we take a traditional face-to-face class of maybe up to 30 students and just plonk them into a WebEx event, it will be a challenge for the teacher to maintain control over the needs of all of those students and to give them the opportunity to be involved. So it's worth considering from your site's perspective how you want to set that up. Okay, final message from me, and two parts to it, practical part and a pedagogical part. Technology. I talked about the fact that it will break from time to time. Pay particular attention to how you support students with the technology and how you support teachers with the technology, trying to alleviate or eliminate as many of the frustrations with technology will give you the best online learning experience as possible, and for students, eliminating those frustrations will increase their engagement in the online environment. The other pedagogical challenge that all teachers face in the online task is how to maintain ongoing regular feedback when students are predominantly working in an independent space. We need to be creative with that. We need to use some platforms and methodologies that are different to what we use in face-to-face teaching. But again, my experience tells me that where teachers get this one right, where they can provide regular ongoing feedback about learning, they get good results with their students. And just from a senior years perspective, the concept of supervision of tasks from a SACE perspective needs some consideration and a planned approach so that everyone knows what the rules of the game are in relation to supervision of tasks. Good luck with your online teaching and learning using WebEx. I hope things go well.